Hi, my name is Trevor, and I'm a visualization researcher and PhD student in the High Dive Lab at Harvard Medical School. Today, we'll explore how to effectively integrate interactive data visualizations within Jupyter Notebooks using anywidget. I'll demonstrate how to create custom Jupyter widgets like the one you see here, which unlike normal notebook outputs, enables a deeper connection between interactive visualizations and your code and data. With anywidget, authoring and sharing these types of integrations is simple and easy. Let's switch over to a notebook to get started. So Jupyter Notebooks are a great way to weave code, prose, and visualizations together and promote this idea of literate programming. However, traditional visualizations within notebooks are often static, and this creates very one-way workflows. So I'm in this notebook, I can run this cell, I can look at this data set, and then if I want to visualize this data, I might reach for a library like Matplotlib or Seaborn, which render this visualization as a static plot. And these static plots leave a lot to be desired, right? So the visualizations are generated to inform the analysis, but they lack some type of interactivity. So there's no way for me to, from this particular view, manipulate the data. And so in order to update this view, I have to go back, I have to change this code and re-execute this cell, and versus something that might be more intuitive or easy to do within an interactive interface. Libraries like Seaborn create these static figures, but there are other libraries that introduce slightly more interactivity within notebooks. So we can plot this example using a library called Altair, which is a wrapper around a web-based technology called Vega-Lite. And what Altair does is it allows us to define the visualization on the Python side, and then it renders a web-based view that has some interactivity. And so we can create this visualization that now has some interaction, such as hovering, or if I draw a selection, I can create a selection that hovers a set of points, and I can see other views within this visualization updated based off of those selections. So here I can see within the selection the count of the different records for Europe, Japan, and the United States. However, it might be useful to actually look at these data within other tools that I have in my environment. And a big caveat to this type of surface level JavaScript integration is that you can't actually take the selection out of this view. And so the selections are confined to this JavaScript output, and I can't go down to this cell and ask for something from this chart. So we can't bring the selection back out into Python, and that makes this type of visualization quite limited. And I think because of this typical type of experience in notebooks, many visualization developers think that visualizations are sort of stop here, and also many visualization users think that visualizations stop here. But this type of integration doesn't have to stop here, and actually it can go much further. And there's a lot of potential in building out interactive visualizations within computational notebooks because of the way that they can be packaged and discovered by end users. So for example, rather than needing to leave the notebook environment to use an interactive visualization tool, a computational notebook researcher and end user can just pip install a visualization tool like they would any other computational library and use that as a part of their analysis. And from the visualization developer perspective, they have all this access to the modern graphics and UI libraries that are available to the web ecosystem. And so I think that there can really be this harmony within notebooks to build out these fine-tailored interactions. And Jupyter widgets offer a solution. So widgets extend notebooks with interactive controls for Python objects that live in the kernel. And so you can think of them as taking these outputs and really bringing them alive in a way that they allow you to update variables based off of user interactions. And this allows for not one-way communication, but rather two-way communication between our visualizations and our code. And so using the anywidget library, let's see how anywidget simplifies this process and allows us to bring this selection out of this particular chart. So I can start by importing anywidget and another library for defining the pieces of state that I want to share between the front end and Python. And I can define my own widget called chart widget, which has two important pieces of state. The first is going to be the Vega-Lite specification, and the second is going to be this selection that we want to propagate between the front end and the back end. And then finally, on my widget, I defined a little bit of JavaScript code that renders the visualization using the Vega-Lite library, which I import here. And second, it sets up an event handler to share and update this selection on my widget anytime that it changes within the UI. And so within just a few lines of code, we can create another visualization that integrates right within this notebook that looks exactly like the Altair widget from before and has the same exact visualization outputs. But now within this notebook cell below, I have access to the selection that I've made within this view. So I can drag and I can move around this view, and when I rerun this cell, you can see that the selection has changed. And widgets exist in this large ecosystem of other Jupyter widgets that can be connected together using these pieces of reactive state that are stored upon them. And so we can create another widget from a library that's called IPyWidgets, and we can create something called an output widget, which will just display an output that prints our current selection as a subset of the data frame. And we can connect this output widget to our chart by observing any time the selection changes. And we can create a single view of these two together in a notebook cell. So now we have our chart, but any time that we make a selection, we can see that a view of our current selection below the chart. So in just a few lines of code, we're able to extract this information out from this JavaScript sandbox and bring it back into a Python environment that we can then customize and use in many different ways to inform our analysis. And this tool, anywidget, really lowers the barrier to building out this type of interaction. So this chart widget that we created in just a few lines of code, we could share with a collaborator, or we could publish on our own to PyPI, and others could use this within their workflows. And in fact, I shared an example of this widget in the Jupyter blog last year and mentioned how it sort of resolves this long-standing issue in Altair, because this type of selection was actually something that was a long-standing feature request in Altair that there wasn't a good mechanism to implement by the maintainers. And with anywidget's introduction last year, they have now introduced their own Jupyter chart based off of this prototype that has found its way into anywidget 5.1. So I think it's worth mentioning that like Jupyter widgets have been around for a while, but anywidget has really lowered the barrier to building out these types of visualizations and also made them much more accessible to prototype because there's much less tooling involved in trying to build these types of integration. So please check out the AnyWidget project, and I'm excited to share more in the coming days.